One of the most anticipated weeks of the offseason is officially here. It is NFL free agency week, and the Bears got some money to spend in that free agent pool to shore up what this team needs to look like heading into the 2025 season. And there's some names that are pretty enticing to fill in some much needed talent on this roster, and we're here to break it all down. Welcome into the Bear Report podcast. I'm Steven Johnson. He is Zack Pearson. And Zack, it's been a crazy last few days. It seems like there is news breaking every hour. This Sunday has been no different. And it is kind of shaking up what the Bears have in front of them in terms of needs.
This is the time of year where you have to keep your phone on you. You have to constantly check Twitter, check, ESPN, all those apps. It was crazy. I mean, even today, dude, like I thought, okay, I'll get some, time in to spend outside. It's, a nice day outside in the Chicago area. And then within like a span of an hour, there's like 5 moves. You have Devontae Adams going to the Rams, signing a deal there. Harold Landry goes to the Patriots. That takes off a potential target for the Bears, who, it makes sense with Mike Vrabel there. You had DK Metcalf to the Steelers. You look at that one. Pick. Warm weather, check. Yep. Stable quarterback position, check. It makes kind of no sense to me why these guys say it. Myles Garrett earlier in the daytime. What was he? Like his original thing was it's not about the money, and then he signs this monster deal with Cleveland or something like that. And then Josh Allen gets like the most guaranteed money in NFL history, $250 million. It's been a crazy past, couple days. And dude, tomorrow, 11 a.m., the legal tampering starts, and you're going to see a flurry of moves. Like the past 2 years, the Bears have made moves within the past, in the first 30 minutes.
Yep.
TJ Edwards a couple years ago, DeAndre Swift last year. They usually make another one like in the afternoon or at night. So you'll be interested to see how the Bears handle it tomorrow and what other news we get in the NFL. I kind of feel like, there should be some surprise moves, maybe not with the Bears, but like there's always a couple surprise cuts. Aaron Jones was cut on the opening day of free agency. So who knows? It's going to be fun though to track it.
Yep, and then Aaron Jones actually re-signing with the Vikings today is another big move that is keeping him there. $20 million, 13 guaranteed with Minnesota, staying their number one running back. And like you said, there will probably be some more surprises along the way. Again, we're just getting in to the start of it, and it feels like we haven't, because it has been so active. And I think based on the way that the cap has continued to rise astronomically with what the TV money has brought to the table, it has opened up so many more possibilities, and so many more teams have been willing to take on so much more dead money to reset the field. And it's been kind of a mixed bag when it comes to this free agent class. There have been some non-named executives in the NFL saying it's not that great of a class. I beg to differ from the Bears' point of view. There's some pretty solid offensive line options. There's some pretty solid defensive line options. And I think let's start this off with the elephant in the room, and the guy who has been positioned as the Bears' number one target through the media for the better part of the last month, and that's Drew Dalman with the Atlanta Falcons. The center for the Atlanta Falcons seems to be the number one center on the market. Good with his age, has pretty solid stats overall. We even prepared ourselves for this and and made some fancy new graphics as well to kind of go over all of this. So again, 4th out of 64 centers, and on top of that, also looking at 14 to 16 million. I think there's a lot of people right now that have set this up as, okay, if they don't get Drew Dalman, this isn't a good offseason to really solidify the middle of that offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have options. Like there's other centers. He's probably the one that we're most familiar with just because everyone that's on the beat is essentially saying he's the guy that makes the most sense. There was a report today. I think it was Jordan Schultz. Someone had that, there's increasing smoke for Dahlman to the Bears, and it's a deal that could get done early. Like you said, projected 14 to 16 million. I think like 15, 16 is probably that sweet spot for him. I don't know if it's a total failure if they don't get him, but they have to address the center position eventually. Yeah. And you're in this position now where, before we get into everything, let's make it clear, you're gonna overpay in free agency. Every team,
100%.
Every year, oh my God, it's a crazy deal. It's just the reality of it. And when you're the Bears, and it's a position of need, and it's a position that they've ignored the last couple of years under Ryan Poles, now you're in a situation where you want the top guy or you want your guy. You're going to have to overpay. So I do think center is a key need. I think Dahlman, honestly, for making predictions, I think he'll be the first player the Bears, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the first player the Bears agree to a deal with. Kind of just seems like that smoke is there. You get the quote unquote legal tampering period, but everyone is together in Indianapolis for a whole week, 2 weeks before free agency starts. So you could throw legal tampering out the window. It would make sense to see a deal early with him. They did upgrade the offensive line already. And you and I have talked about this, where they're in a tough spot. Like, they needed 2 guards. They needed a center. You could argue they need a left tackle. They already upgraded the offensive line. Now, do they, go out and get Dahlman? I think that's kind of like the icing on the cake there, because you can live with Braxton Jones at left tackle if needed. You could also draft a left tackle if needed. So, yeah, I would like to see Dahlman. I think that's my prediction. I think they'll land him. Because other than that, though, Josh Myers is a center out there. That, you could target. We talked about, him a little bit the last show with, would he come here? Would we pick him over Dahlman? I'd probably go Dahlman. But, Josh Myers is not a terrible, fallback plan. Little younger, I believe. So, yeah. I do think Dahlman is the piece that the Bears have to go get to kind of shore up that line to make you feel better.
Yeah. And, speaking to what else is now available on that offensive line, Ronnie Staley re-signing with Baltimore has obviously kind of shaken up that left tackle market, as well as what was considered one of the top names. And now you're left with kind of a questionable name in Cam Robinson is really the other top name at tackle that I think, for all roster building purposes, you would probably feel most comfortable with, outside of making a draft pick early in that first or second round at the left tackle position, like you said, if you roll in. And again, talking about Myers, talking about Dahlman, there is one other name I do want to bring up just to get your thoughts on. He is a little bit older. He does have that first round pedigree. And again, it's a team that I feel like the Bears recently have been kind of dipping into the pool, and that's going back to Indianapolis, speaking of being there for a week with everybody. And that is Ryan Kelly. Again, another guy that, not too bad, middle of the road. He's had some injury concerns as of late, but also cheaper. Again, 32 years old. He's a little bit more there in terms of that veteran presence, and has really been a pure anchor, working with Andrew Luck in his early years, and the tumultuous offense that has been the Indianapolis Colts over the better part of the last 7-8 years. But again, another option, and maybe a bridge option that isn't necessarily breaking the bank, because as we know, the Bears do have the space. They're going to make some cap moves that are probably going to free up another $15 to $20 million. But Ryan Kelly, too old, especially with Tooney on board? Or do you feel, because I feel like Ryan Poles has made it a pretty strong conviction to get younger when he can?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about the age. I'd be worried about the injury. I believe he had 2 injuries the past 2 years, had surgery, I want to say this year, middle of the season, week 7, 8, that kind of hampered him. He's a guy, I think, that's kind of like your fallback plan. I don't think the Bears are going to go out and target him right away and say, yep, this is it. Because you could always, you could bring back, Coleman Shelton at center, a guy who's younger, who's familiar. Yeah, but but he's familiar. I mean, he's familiar with Caleb
I
Williams.
get the familiarity.
Yeah, but so I mean, if we're comparing like Ryan Kelly to Coleman Shelton, I'd probably rather have Coleman Shelton just because he's going to be cheaper. I think there's familiarity. The injury history isn't there with him. But Ryan Kelly's also, like you said, he's been around a long time. He's a veteran. Tooney's a veteran. So you kind of bring that veteran presence because your tackles are young. Darnell Wright on the right side's young. Braxton Jones is young. If you draft a rookie, he's young. Kieran Amagaji's young. So it's like no matter who you bring in, unless you sign a veteran tackle, you're going to be young on the outside. So, yeah, I mean, I'm probably out on Ryan Kelly, honestly. And I know someone in here said we don't need another R. Kelly. It's actually a pretty damn good comment.
It is.
I didn't even think of that. So props to that because that's good. Look at this. Andre James. That's actually an interesting one. I think he's way better than people give him credit to. He's kind of like the quiet, really good center, in my opinion, if that kind of makes sense. Like he doesn't get, at least maybe because he played out on the West Coast with like the Raiders. I don't know. I just feel like I don't hear enough of them. Excuse me. So there's going to be options. If you're looking at it though, it's probably Dahlman is probably their top target. I'd say Myers is 2. I'd probably put James ahead of Kelly. But yeah, I feel like you got to get Dahlman or you got to get Myers, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to follow up on Andre James, I do think that is a very interesting option as well. Again, kind of a down 2024 overall, but that Raiders team had a down year in general. I don't think you're going to find much to write home about outside of the name Brock Bowers on the offensive side of the ball for the Raiders in 2024. But in 2023, he was considered a top 10 center. Again, a little bit of risk there in which type of player you're getting. And again, maybe a little bit, more bulk as well. I think 6'4". I think he's a little bit bigger from the center aspect from that. So again, another option to throw into the ring. I'm curious about it, but I don't know necessarily what kind of contract you would be, looking at as well. I don't feel like they were really paying him a whole much in Vegas. I think they only ended up saving about $3.5 million. Okay, so it's 3 years, $24 million is what they signed for with the Raiders. I mean, not terrible. Not terrible.
Yeah.
And maybe, again, coming off of a down year, but again, a very top-heavy market at the position, he could end up getting a raise for all we know.
Yeah, and, there's something here that the Patriots need a center. They have the most cap space, I believe, before their Harold Landry deal. Looking at their needs, and this is from ESPN. This was actually today, Mike Reese, really good beat reporter for them. His number one need is the offensive line. Left tackle stands out as a returning starter. Vernon Lowe had a good pass, or not a very good pass block rating. But he says they have 5 question marks at this point. So yeah, I do think the Patriots then, need a center. Jacksonville needs a center. Their center just retired. They're ahead of the Bears in the draft. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be teams that need centers, but the Bears have money to spend too. They have a young quarterback. They have a new coach that was the talk of the combine 2 weeks ago. So they're a free agent destination. And, comes down to it. I always say it's always going to come down to money, I think, at the end. I don't blame players for it, but, the Bears will have some competition at some of these key spots. And we've already seen, Harold Landry go to New England. Now, Mike Vrabel is familiar with him there. The Bears have a need as, for a pass rusher. Are the Bears going to give him that much money? Probably not. And that's kind of the one thing we have to, also say is the way that Ryan Poles and the staff do this is they're spending weeks. They're preparing for this for weeks, months. They have their price. And we've seen Ryan Poles is not going to go over his price.
No.
Who was it? And who signed with Mike McGlinchey with Denver? Bears were 100% in on him. Took the bigger deal in Denver. And the Bears were just not going to go over their price. But when you have needs like this, when you ignore needs, pass rush, defensive line, center, guards, you're going to have to overpay. So it's going to be interesting to see what Ryan Poles does, because the first couple of years in free agency, he hasn't really gone out and gone over his number, I'd say. I think he's probably stayed very close.
Yeah, and to that point, we've heard a lot about aggressiveness in free agency from Ryan Poles this offseason, as well as Ben Johnson, just talking about what they need to do. And you could argue that timidness in offering that money and not necessarily wanting to offer that money is what has gotten the Bears into this roster issue where they have just not shored up what they need to shore up on the offensive line and the defensive line. And so it reaches a point where clearly you need to recalibrate what you're doing when it comes to your plans in the offseason and try something new. And at this point, we're on the third offseason where the Bears have significant money to spend and they need to spend it. I get that there's going to be some situations coming up where hopefully you're going to have to pay Caleb a whole bunch of money. Again, you're still 4 years out from that, maybe 3. Who knows how that everything will go there? But
Yeah.
beyond that, you've got a bunch of other young pieces that you're going to have to start looking at even earlier than that. And so the question now becomes, how do you balance all of that? There really hasn't been much in terms of the signing bonus aspect that they've really dove into as well. It's very much been we're going to make this a top heavy contract. We're going to pay you a lot up front, make sure those back end years are not necessarily going to carry a lot of weight in terms of what the team is responsible for. And so that way, if it doesn't work out, it's a lot easier to cut out. And we've seen that this offseason with some of the names that have come, DeMarcus Walker being one of them.
Yeah.
Gerald Everett, he's getting cut as well. I mean, that's where a lot of the savings is coming from because that's what Ryan Poles likes to do in terms of his structure of the contract. And so,
Yep.
I think, looking at the defensive side of the ball, there's going to be even more urgency to this. So you look at the overall landscape on the defensive line, the edge rushers, even the defensive tackles. It looks like it's a pretty healthy market overall. There's a lot of names up there that are very familiar to the, everyday NFL fan, but it's also going to command a lot of money. I mean, we're talking about a 34-year-old Khalil Mack, who is atop that list for a lot of people. He's currently averaging $19 million a year. There's talk that now he's going to even get a pay bump. He's 34 years old, and he's getting a pay bump to like 22 to 24 million. I mean, it's just insane how much. Is that what the numbers that I put on here? I don't even know if it's the numbers. 22 to 24 million. But he was the 5th best, according to Pro Football Focus, in terms of what he did last year with the Chargers. I mean, maybe it's a contract year thing, but still, Khalil Mack is Khalil Mack. And I think there's also a lot of Bear fans that are kind of clamoring for this reunion as an option as well, just because of the familiarity. I'm just not seeing it, but, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the nostalgia factor is obviously, something you have to kind of take into factor as why Khalil Mack's name is being brought up, which is fine. He's obviously not the same player that the Bears traded for in 2018. He did have 17 and a half sacks in 2023. Last year, a little bit of a dip in production. I think he had 5 or 6 sacks. So, yeah, but you're not, if you're going after Khalil Mack, you're not expecting him to put up 15, 16 sacks.
No.
It's just a guy that you hope you can get 8 to 10 sacks from and hope that Montez Sweat can get his 12, 13, 14 sacks. Maybe a kid like Austin Booker can kind of develop. They still have Darrell Taylor as well, who, in a weird way, broke out week 1, didn't hear from him the rest of the season. But looking back at it, you look at the tape, he was actually chipped a lot. They were trying to double team him a lot, which was very shocking. But yeah, with Khalil Mack, you look at the Chargers and, now they don't have Joey Bosa. They don't have Joey Bosa. They don't have Khalil Mack as of now. I imagine if the Bears want Khalil Mack, they're probably going to have to outbid the Chargers. I think it'd be down to those 2 teams, maybe a surprise team, the third or another 4th team. But, it just kind of feels like Mack is in a place where he probably wants to stay in one place for the rest of his career. California is not a bad place to be in terms of weather and things like that. But would he welcome a return to Chicago? I don't know. The Bears did release that highlight video. Did you see that yesterday?
Why do they do this?
I don't even know what that was. What even was that? like that made I'm still trying to figure it out. It had four clips of in it. Like that was kind of mind boggling to me. But yeah, I don't know. So like Spot Track has them right now, 23.6 million average annual salary, which that's a lot of money for a 34-year-old pass rusher. But if you want a pass rusher, that's a premium position in this league. You know, you're gonna have to go out and get one. And also, like, I don't think if they sign Khalil Mack, let's say, you know, someone else, Chase Young, Josh Sweat, any of those guys, even if they sign anyone, they still should draft more. You know what I mean? It should not prohibit them from drafting a pass rusher. It should not prohibit them from drafting any offensive lineman at all. Even if they could sign 3 more offensive linemen, you know, in the next 2-3 weeks. They should still draft at least 1 to 2 offensive linemen. They have 4 picks in the top 100, barring any trades. 2 of those should definitely be in the trenches, but possibly 3. So yeah, no, I mean, Khalil Mack thing will be a talking point the rest of the week. But do the Chargers? I mean, the Chargers literally have no one as their pass rush, so I can't imagine they'd be too happy with watching Bosa probably go to San Francisco and, you know, Mack going elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems as though Joey Bosa is starting to creep into the San Francisco conversation to join his brother out there in the Bay, which that'll be interesting to say the least. But another name that you mentioned in there, and talking about Josh Sweat, again, another guy that had a very good 2024 season, commanding anywhere between 18 to $20 million on average, 28th out of over 200 edge rushers that qualified in 2024, according to Pro Football Focus. And again, there's a lot of Philadelphia Eagles that are currently on the market this offseason. It seems like, you know, they cut a few, you know, they had Bradbury, they had Slay that they added to the secondary market. You know, again, Josh Sweat that they also have there, and then their defensive tackle as well, that they added to the mix, Williams,
Milton Williams.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's even any reason to get into that, because I'd be stunned if the Bears chose to dump that much money on a defensive tackle. But you know, maybe I'm wrong. I mean,
he's going to get 20 million, 20, 25. I mean, he's going to get a lot of money. And that's what showing up in the Super Bowl, showing up in the playoffs does. All these guys are going to get a lot of money for their performance. I mean, Sweat 2.5 sacks in the Super Bowl. He had 8 total sacks this year, but you saw him on the big stage do this. Same with Milton Williams. I think he had 5 or 6 sacks this year. Dominant in pass pro win rate or whatever that stat is for ESPN. You know, obviously Sweat 11 and 22, 2022, 4th round pick. You know, 27 years old, on the younger end in terms of pass rushers. But you're going to have to, you know, pay that premium if you want him, and hope that it just wasn't, you know, a 1-game wonder, you know, in terms of the Super Bowl. And yeah, you know, you pair him with Montez Sweat, you got a sweaty line. So as Matt Eberflus would say that, I'll never forget, he said one time, I was in the press room, said one time in an interview, he said, it's the sweat effect. And I'm like, what is this guy talking about?
Would you rather have the sweat effect or the amazing whights
from the Eagles? Yeah.
I'm like, who is coming up with these nicknames for these tandems in the NFL? I'm just like, what is going on?
The sweat effect, yeah. Good on either. That's
all things considered, I think it's clear that the Bears they need to get an edge. They need to get a productive edge out of free agency in addition to the draft. If they do not spend one of their first 3 picks in the NFL draft on an edge rusher, they are, in my opinion, failing in terms of what they need to do to this team. I think, you know, mentioning Darrell Taylor and just how much, you know, he was chipped. You could probably bring him back cheap, maybe for a little bit more than what he was making, but still $4 to $5 million. I would take Taylor back. I think that there were times where he really flashed to a point where it makes sense to do that on the cheap, see if he can bring, you know, some more of that tenacity that he brought to the table. And then, there's some other cheaper options that are out there as well. Again, I'm going to go back to the Colts.
Yeah, I know.
The
I
Colts
knew it.
here. Dio, again, a younger, 26 years old, 15 to 17 million. Not necessarily the production that you would necessarily want to see heading in, but there's a lot of people thinking he's just finally starting to break through in terms of his productivity. Again, nothing that really stands out there from that grade, 76 out of 211. And I believe there was only 4 sacks this past year. So again,
Three.
not 3. Yeah. So
eight,
I mean,
eight
not
in 2023.
right. And so 5, 8, and 3. So last 3 years. See if I can do mathematics. 16 sacks over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But again, a young guy who's going to be 26 by the end of the 2025 season. That while the production isn't there, he's going to probably get a pretty sizable chunk of money. And the question becomes, talking about that aggressiveness and Ryan Poles not willing to overpay for guys, is that if guys like Dio are getting this money, who is he willing to spend it on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like looking at this defensive end, pass rush situation, there's a lot of big names out there. We've already seen Harold Landry go. Joey Bosa is a huge name. Hassan Reddick is a big name. I don't think the Bears are going to want anything to do with that situation. You could probably rule out Bosa. You can rule out Landry. You can rule out Reddick. I think you can rule out Von Miller. Too old. And, that kind of leaves you with, guys like Josh Sweat, guys like Khalil Mack, Chase Young, Deo, just kind of going through my list here on something I did earlier. Aziz Ojarali, I'm going to butcher that name, he's 24 years old, and he had a big rookie season. Season, but he's been hurt. So that's probably a guy you can get on the cheap, on the discount. He's probably not going to land a huge deal. I don't have his projections on me. I can look up. I got Spot Track pulled up, but there's options. There's definitely options out there. And there's going to be maybe players released, but I'm with you. Darrell Taylor's probably going to be one of those guys. Yeah, Aziz has $7.6 million is his projected salary on a 2-year deal, which I'd probably take that chance. That'd probably be a risk if you can't get any of the guys you want. But also looking at it, I think defensive tackle, getting a third guy, potentially a fourth guy, is almost just as important as getting another pass rusher. And I'm glad someone else brought this up because I've been talking to people about this. Look at when Andrew Billings went down. Gervon Dexter's numbers kind of dipped. Pectoral issue, tore it out of surgery. All the focus on Dexter. And Dexter, he played well. The numbers aren't there in the second half. He played well. He was the focus on the defensive line, but guys like Byron Cowart, Chris Williams were able to produce. But you can't rely on those guys going into this year. You get a third guy. Obviously Jonathan Allen's the big name. I don't think the Bears, would spend a lot of money on that. I'm curious what he's projected to get, and who's going to be interested in him. But you look at him. We brought up Milton Williams. He's probably going to get $20 million a year. I don't think the Bears are in the market for that. There's a couple other guys out there, names I'm kind of blanking on right now.
One that I do want to bring up that I think is an interesting option. And again, I know Ryan Poles and his experience with Bengals defensive linemen in free agency, not the greatest track record, as we all know, but BJ Hill. This again, a defensive tackle stepping up, probably that $8 to $10 million range, and was pretty solid overall and was very consistent, has been a very consistent piece to that Bengals defense in the middle. And not necessarily putting forth, major sack numbers. Last 4 years has been 6-3, 5, and 3. But again, a cheaper option, and also looking at somebody who's 29 years old right now, still on the right side for the time being, of 30.
Yep.
And not going to break the bank, for half the cost of a guy like Milton Williams, who, had that spotlight on him. You could argue, that you could get similar production, again, based on what that offense or what that defensive line was able to do, what the Eagles had, and even what the Bengals had. Like, again, BJ Hill doing pretty darn well, had Trey Hendrickson next to him. I don't understand a reason to overpay at that position. Like you said, getting a third, fourth guy in there on top of Billings and on top of Dexter to really get a full rotation rolling with maybe another young player in the second, third round come April.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And there are other defensive tackles, that are out there. DJ Jones, I believe his name is, from Denver. San Francisco. I blanked on his name. San Francisco released a defensive tackle literally 3 days ago. But here's the thing, though. Like, going back to the Ryan Poles number, who was the guy that the Broncos signed? Was it the Broncos or Seahawks signed a couple years ago? Was it Draymond Jones, the defensive tackle that the Bears were in on? He got the big deal, and look what happened. Released after 2 seasons. So, it's a gamble. You have to trust your, scouting. You have to trust your numbers. And if the Bears don't want to spend big there, they'll go for some of these, I like to call them tier 2, tier 3 guys that are signing a week from Monday, 2 weeks from Monday, into April. That's kind of when you find those value signings. But yeah, they need a third defensive tackle. They need a guy rotation put in with Billings and Gervon Dexter.
Javon Hargrave is who you're thinking of, by the way.
Yes. And yeah, I would like them to address that. I'd like them to address defense tackle, pass rusher. Those, to me, are the 2 biggest on the defensive side of the football. Maybe go out and get another safety. Maybe you can draft a safety, but yeah, you need to win in the trenches. We've been saying it since Ryan Poles got here. They finally got to address it.
Yeah, it's I feel as though now with Ben Johnson coming from a team that offensive line was such a strength, and then you have Dennis Allen, who is just so ruthless on the defensive side of the ball. And there's been some conversations in the chat about the style of player that Dennis Allen loves. And we talked a little bit about Chase Young, being in New Orleans last year. And there was talk that New Orleans was going to re-sign him. It has not happened yet. It looks like he's going to hit free agency. I think a question needs to be answered as to whether Chase Young enjoyed his time with Dennis Allen, and the fact that he did go to the Saints because of what Dennis Allen was selling him. And how much of a solid connection there is there, because let's be real. Chase Young is a player that has been connected to the Bears for the better part of 2.5 seasons, back to when Montez Sweat was traded to the Bears. And there was talk of, okay, who's going to get Montez Sweat? Who's going to get Chase Young? And I think when the trade dropped, everyone was like, it's not Chase Young. Yeah. And now there's an opportunity to reunite that Washington, tandem at end. And again, a guy that is familiar with the new defensive coordinator, which goes a long way with implementing what this team needs. And yes. I think the projection right now on Chase Young, let's look here, $16 to $18 million per year for Chase Young. So a little bit higher. He's been, signing these 1-year prove-it deals to try and get himself back into good graces. I know there were some people really riding him hard about maybe giving up on a few plays in the Super Bowl a couple years ago when he was with San Francisco. Is that going to be a concern? And again, not necessarily putting forth incredible effort either. I mean, 72nd out of 211 eligible edge rushers a year ago. And, I think, there needs to be something said there where if you're going after a guy for the last 2 years who's been coming off of these prove-it deals, and in the grand scheme of things, has he proved much? Probably not. I mean, 8 sacks in 2023, 6 sacks last year. but he's only going to be 26 years old. Like,
Yeah,
he's
still
young.
so young, man. Still so, I
No
mean,
pun intended.
no, he's still, I mean, look at it this way. Like, he was number 2 overall pick, high expectations, probably didn't live up to those expectations, had, the criticism of taking plays off at the end of his Commanders career, into the 49ers part of his career, signed that 1-year deal with the Saints as kind of a prove-it deal. But his physical build, how he used to play, or when he really pops on tape, is exactly what Dennis Allen described. They want physical, man. They want guys who are going to tackle, finish plays, get to the quarterback. So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me to see him come up. If you could get him 2 years, let's say $15 million, throw in some guaranteed money, work that contract. Yeah, like, I'd be on board with it. I don't think it's the worst move. I don't think it's a move that you're, all right, defense is automatically better, but it's just a rotational guy that kind of comes in because, excuse me, at this point, outside of what Josh Sweat, outside of what Harold Landry would have been in terms of a signing, there's not a dominant free agent pass rusher because those guys do not hit the market. There's a reason they don't hit the open market. It's just like tackles.
But there is an option that is hitting the trade market.
Yes. They hit the trade market.
Let's talk about him. Trey Hendrickson. He has been given the opportunity to seek a trade from the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, the NFL sack leader over the last 2 years, really been dominant. Again, a little bit older, 30 years old, but Cincinnati apparently looking for a late second-round pick in trade. All that being said, a second-round pick for the NFL sack leader, great. Would use it any day of the week to do that, but the last 48 hours and edge rusher contracts scare the living daylights out of me.
And you're going to have to pay them. You know what I mean? Like, you're not trading for him just to have him for 1 year and giving up a second-round pick that's, top 50. Like, it's just not happening. You have to pay him. And, we saw what Harold Landry got. We saw what Myles Garrett got. We're probably going to see what Micah Parsons is going to get eventually. Yeah, it's a scary market. Max Crosby. Yeah, Max Crosby had the highest contract for what, 2 days, 1 day? Something like that, a couple days. Yeah, it's crazy, man. But if you're going to make that move, you got to pay up the money. I don't think the Bears are going to do it. I've been seeing Washington. I don't know if you've been seeing. I think you've seen Washington is kind of the favorite to land him.
I mean, all things considered, I think it was a really poor move on Washington's part to trade for Deebo Samuel. I think that is a gigantic waste of money just based on his statistics. And I think spending that much money, again, you can point to Khalil Mack as a perfect example of, just because somebody's over 30 years old doesn't mean they're going to stop producing. But at the same time, that is so much money tied up in someone who is so much older. And that has to be a concern for teams, especially teams like the Commanders coming off a very promising season with an NFC Championship game and a lot of cap to spend. But those two guys eating up that much, and if Jaden Daniels, let's say he has another hot season, maybe 2, who's to say his agent isn't going to come calling and say, hey, guess what? Time to pay up. Just like what Lamar Jackson tried doing, just like what Patrick Mahomes tried doing before that contract comes up. And that's got to be an alarming thing that the Commanders have to look at down the road. I'd be shocked. But even on the flip side of that, I don't know where he's going to go. I really don't.
The Bears might be in that situation too. I'm not saying, not to play, the narrative that we heard about Caleb. I'm not saying that. Like, they'd be smart to probably get negotiations early with Caleb Williams if he shows he's the next 2-3 years, he's the guy. You're going to be spending a lot of money, man. These quarterback contracts are just going to go up and up and up and up. So, I mean, do you make that move now and see what you have in the future? Like, they're not going to get out of the Tremaine Edmonds contract this year. They're not going to take on that dead cap money. That would totally screw them in the next couple of years. So yeah, you have to be very diabolical with your moves, and you have to honestly look long term too. If you're Ryan Poles, you have to look at who's projected to be a free agent next year, who's projected to kind of be a free agent the year after that, how much money you're going to spend this year, how much money you're going to spend next year. And maybe that's why they didn't spend a whole lot of money. And last year, it goes back to you have your number. You don't want to go over it. You got to be cautious because a lot of these deals, I mean, you mentioned Hargrave from San Francisco. The Bears were in on him too. Same with Draymond Jones, as I said. And they both went for a lot of money, and Ryan Poles did not budge. Mike McGlinchey, same thing. So it's a process. Trey Edgerton, I would love him, but you got to make sure, that's the right move for you because you could really hamper your cap. You could really hamper your future moves down the line if you make that move and you pay him all this money and it doesn't work out. But that's why he gets paid the big bucks. That's why Ryan Poles gets paid the big bucks, We could talk about it all we want. We're not writing those checks.
Hey, we're here to armchair and nothing more.
Exactly.
But there is an interesting point. Craig making this comment on here now, but the comment before, even just talking about the defensive backfield and the secondary, I think we might see a surprise signing in the secondary, just based on the makeup of what the corners and the safety room currently look like. Again, there's a lot of questions around Jaquan Brisker. Is he going to come back fully healthy after a very lengthy absence from a concussion? You have Kevin Byard, who is not getting any younger, and so there's your two starting safeties, and you got Jonathan Owens behind him. I mean, is there really much there that makes you say, okay, we feel really comfortable about what's happening at the safety spot? And then looking at your three starting corners, again, do you get Stevenson back into a mentality that, you feel good about where he's at when he clearly had a falling off after that Commanders Hail Mary? Jalen's not going anywhere with his contract. And then you have Gordon, who has shown very strong abilities in the nickel, but at the same time, there have been some injury concerns with him. And so I think based on even some of the options that are available in the secondary, that you might even have to look at that and say, okay, we might need to earmark a few extra dollars that we aren't maybe necessarily considering outside of the trenches to really shore up what this defense needs. I'm not sure if Dennis Allen's really going to be content with what starters he's bringing back, even though it's a pretty turnkey group from a year ago.
And Ben Johnson said it too. They've talked, him and Dennis Allen have talked about getting a pass rush. And one thing he mentioned was pass rush isn't only on the defensive line. It's how long your secondary can cover. It's the plays your secondary can make. It's the blitzes from that nickel spot. It's an all-around effort. The Bears secondary, I think fully healthy, everyone playing to their potential, could be one of the best in the NFL. But there's still questions. Jaquan Brisker is a question mark. Kevin Byard, how long are you going to have him? He's a veteran. He's getting older. Tyreek Stevenson. Really, I think you're very comfortable going in with Kyler Gordon, in my opinion. You're very comfortable going in with Jalen Johnson. I think you could draft another defensive back. You could sign one, or you could draft a safety, sign a safety, a free agent. And it's a pretty good defensive back safety class, I think. I think you can find some good value on day two. So it wouldn't shock you to see the Bears go there, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if that is a surprise signing. I'd be fine with it. The only surprise signing I don't want to see, running back at this stage, I just don't think there's anything like out there. Quarterback obviously is not really a good free agent class this year.
No.
I think we're going to go wide receiver too. I don't think it's going to be not a wide receiver two, but someone to play that third wide receiver spot, whether it's Keenan Allen, whether it's Josh Reynolds. Reynolds kind of makes a lot of sense with his connections with Ben Johnson. So, Diami Brown's a guy you could probably get on 2-year cheap deal to maybe come in and play wide receiver 4 if needed. He had success with Jaden Daniels last year. So there's going to be options for some surprise signings. Let's kind of wait and see. That's what the beauty of free agency is.
Exactly. And shout out to to Nick Whalen over at the Hallis Beat as well here with the Bear Report. He did a pretty good deep dive on Twitter about some of the top names at each position that the Bears should probably consider. And you mentioning Josh Reynolds, mentioning Tim Patrick
Tim
as two
Patrick, yeah.
guys that Ben Johnson is familiar with. It's a very healthy wide receiver market. It has a very deep veteran presence. I mean, you can go down the list. You mentioned a couple of them: Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, those are a lot of names. And that's not even including Devontae Adams, who signed for big money today. $22 million average annual value with the LA Rams, who are still apparently hell-bent on getting Cooper Kupp out of LA, which someone still needs to explain that to me, because I think I'd rather much have Cooper Kupp than Devontae Adams based on his splits the last couple years. But again, those cheaper options that exist, and like even beyond Josh Reynolds, even beyond Tim Patrick, there's some other interesting options that have shown up on a big stage over the course of the last couple years, and make you wonder, okay, is there a little bit more left in the tank to help, again, a wide receiver 3, a wide receiver 4? I frankly, I don't even know who's going to be in the rest of this wide receiver room for the Bears. I mean, Tyler Scott, what is the new regime going to think of him? What else is there?
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of it right now.
Yeah,
it sucks saying that. Darius Slayton's another guy that I'm really high on. He actually had 1,000-yard season early on with the Giants.
Bad quarterback play.
Exactly. I would love to see if he has an opportunity to step up and step into a wide receiver 3 type role. He'll be 28 years this upcoming season, but we'll probably command somewhere in that $13 to $15 million range. Again, it's spending a lot of money, even though the class is deep. And so maybe it is going after that aging veteran, that veteran presence. If it is bringing back Keenan Allen, he made $20 million a year ago. There's projection between 10 and 12 million this year. There's a lot of numbers that will just need to shift, and I think that you could honestly pick from a group of 5 blindly and say, okay, we're probably going to get about the same productivity that we would no matter who we pull out of this group for the same exact amount of money.
Yeah, I think Keenan Allen makes sense to come back if you're taking him at that price range. I mean, it's a top option, because you're not going to get, you weren't going to get Devontae Adams. You weren't going to get DK Metcalf and through a trade, kind of things like that. So if you get Keenan Allen, and he's expressed some interest in coming back. And honestly, I thought the Rams would have been a spot for him, because he wants to be back on the West Coast. Kind of narrows it down. Does he want to go to Las Vegas? He's probably not going to go back to the Chargers. Does he want to go to Arizona? They kind of need, another wide receiver. Outside of that, I mean, you're not just, that's it in the West Coast. Like, he's not going to go to Seattle. Like Denver, that's not West Coast. So yeah, I mean, 49ers, I don't know, maybe it might make a little sense. I don't know. They have some wide receiver issues, that they're still going through. And Brandon Ayuk, he's, is he going to get traded or get moved eventually? So yeah, I mean, Keenan Allen makes sense. Tim Patrick, like you said. I do like Darius Slayton, man. I think he'd be like the perfect wide receiver 3. Can play in the slot, can play outside. I still want a burner. Get me in the draft. Get me a burner in the draft, a fast wide receiver that Ben Johnson can kind of scheme up plays for and kind of get open, like we saw kind of in Detroit. So yeah, I mean, wide receiver, it still needs to be upgraded. Like, you're fine at 1 and 2. If you bring Keenan Allen back, you're fine 1, 2, 3. You can get Keenan Allen. Maybe you could get, Reynolds, draft someone. And then what do you do with Tyler Scott? So they got some options. I think it'll be interesting to see, because Ben Johnson, obviously, he had, oh God, what's the quote he had on 670? No block, no rock. He knows what he wants from his wide receivers, and you better block. So I'd be targeting guys, and that's why Reynolds.
We
That's why
might not be
Patrick.
getting Keenan Allen back then.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But that's why, guys like Reynolds and Patrick make a lot of sense. They blocked. They want to block. Roma Dunze wants to block. So yeah, it's going to be kind of fun to see how, especially on that offensive side, how Ben Johnson wants to mold the roster in a key spot like that.
Yeah, and even beyond that, and I'm glad this question came up because I think the Bears are still one tight end short. Again, with Gerald Everett getting cut, Mercedes Lewis, I hope, is very content in retirement, and we
Yeah, I
will
don't think
never
he's
have to
coming
see
back.
him on a roster again. I mean, this is Cole Kmet's room. Like, plain and simple, he needs to be the focal point based on the amount of money that the Bears are paying him out. Which is pretty healthy right now. He's the 7th highest paid player on this roster, and his cap hit's almost $12 million. Like, that's pretty darn serious.
Slayton, Darius Slayton. Sorry, I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, Darius
Slayton. Sorry, he's the wide receiver from the Giants. Slay is the cornerback that was released.
Yep. So at tight end, they're really the top 3 names, because I think if they're going to bring in a third tight end, it needs to be somebody that has a little bit more of a receiver edge to them, to complement Kmet, because I think Durham Smythe is very good when it comes to the blocking aspect, and we're going to see a lot out of him. With what that position specifically entails in Ben Johnson's offense. Evan Ingram, I think, is going to be far too much money, even though he had some injury concerns. He's going to be 31 years old. I'm still shocked that Jacksonville cut him. I mean, he caught 100 passes a year ago. Tyler Conklin and Juwan Johnson. Those are the 2 that I'm most curious about. But the question being, I don't think Ryan Poles will necessarily be content with spending that much more money at tight end, that will probably end up seeing the Bears go and grab a middle round tight end in the draft to fill that third slot, because Conklin and Johnson are probably going to get somewhere between 7 and 10 million annual average value, which again, when you're paying somebody $12 million, can't do that. Like, you just can't. And really, you scroll down the rest of the list of who is available in free agency at tight end. It's not pretty. Like,
no, it never
bad.
is. Yeah, and Durham Smythe or Smith or however you pronounce them. I'm not good with names. In Miami, if you watch, man, they kind of use him like that hybrid type tight end and fullback too. They'd line him up in the backfield, which he's gonna come out here. He's gonna be a nice blocking tight end. His Cole Kmet's room. Mason Taylor out of LSU is probably a tight end I'd keep an eye on in the draft, kind of day 2, day 3. They're not going to get Tyler Warren. I'd be shocked if they drafted him at 10 or even traded back for him, anything like that. So you're right. It's a tough position right now because of free agency classes. You're not going to overspend for Evan Ingram. You're not going to overspend for Juwan Johnson. Do you want to spend much for Conklin? I don't know. But we're seeing like tight ends, man. Look at Trey McBride in Arizona. Fantastic year, even though he only had 1 touchdown, I think it was. 2, he had a rushing touchdown, but a receiving touchdown. So yeah, tight ends can be very important for the Bears, especially moving forward with Ben Johnson's offense. They're going to need more from Cole Kmet. They're going to get him involved a lot more, and they're going to need a blocking tight end and probably a third type hybrid tight end. So yeah, I'm with you. I'd probably rather see them draft a tight end.
Yeah, and in all honesty, give me Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon in the 4th and just call it a day. Like, I mean,
fine.
he's got some length to him, and honestly, I think he's got some more ability that he hasn't necessarily tapped into just yet. That's probably going to play out pretty decently for him, and is worth the gamble. I mean, 6'5", has a leaner build, 247. There's an option there, and again, career receiving yards almost set the school record at Oregon as well. So again, a guy that, is younger and, has some pretty solid pedigree to what he's been able to do at the top level in the college game. So I'd be curious about that more than anything. We've seen these other guys. We know what they're capable of. Give me something surprising with two guys like Kmet and Smythe, in the building already.
Yes. No, I agree 100% with that. And tight end that would be a big surprise signing for me if it went that route. If they went, a big like a big signing there.
Yep. So I think we're in agreement though. Drew Dahlman is going to be the signing first if we had to say so. I guess if we had to project now, if we predict 12 hours or 16 hours into the future, is it Drew Dahlman the first Bears signing once the tampering period opens? We all know free agency starts tomorrow. Screw Tuesday when pen is put to paper.
No, Wednesday when pen. Wednesday's when. Yeah. I mean, it feels like it. Like that's where all the smoke is. It feels like Drew Dahlman. Like I said to open this up, last 2 years they've signed someone within the first 20, 30 minutes to get a deal done. So it does feel like Dahlman. Max got a lot of hype. But then again, like you look back a couple years ago, Bears were tied to Mike McGlinchey. They were tied to Draymond Jones. So it's like, things can change in a hurry. My best advice, 11 a.m., get on social media and double check the tweet. Make sure there's a lot of followers and it's the right account. Because every year someone's going to get got with one of those fake accounts. And, with the blue check mark now, it's even easier to get that. So, but no, to answer your question, I do think, Dahlman, would you be shocked if it was Reynolds from Detroit? That wouldn't shock me.
No, I think there's one name. I don't think it's going to happen. But on the flip side of that, there is one name I would lose it over if the Bears ended up signing in a good way. In a good way.
Oh, okay, in a good
losing it. If they were to sign him, we talked about wide receiver 3. We didn't bring him up.
Hold on. Would it be? Now I'm blanking on my options. Yeah, I don't know. I don't got it.
Season-ending injury a year ago.
Christian Kirk?
No. Okay. He's with the Texans. They traded him to the Texans.
Oh, they did trade him. That's right. Oh, Stephon Diggs.
No.
Well, season-ending injury. That's right.
True. Yeah, there's a couple of those apparently.
Not Hollywood Brown.
Not Hollywood Brown.
I think he's coming back. Yeah, I think he went back to the Chiefs. It's not. Well, we brought up Tyler Lockett. I don't know.
It's going to cost a bag, and I understand that, but I love him as a route runner. I love him as a player, and if he rebounds fully, I think it would be incredible for this receiving game, and that's Chris Godwin. I would love to see Chris Godwin in a Bears uniform. Yeah, I've loved him all since he started at Tampa Bay and he blew up. Like I'm like, this is the guy. He can do it. He's got it down. And then all of a sudden, boom! Like Penn State all the way into Tampa. He has been fantastic. Cooper Kupp, I'm curious about, but that's a whole nother.
I feel like Cooper Kupp. I feel like Buffalo should go after Cooper Kupp. I mean, they can't rely on Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman and Mac Hollins. Like, you can't. I mean, you give Josh Allen a legit weapon that's not Stephon Diggs. I think that's smart. But no, I'm with you with Godwin, man. And it was a shame he got hurt in that game. That was 2 and 3 scores.
Yeah,
at the end, Monday night
time.
Was it Monday Night Football?
In the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like Godwin should just go back to Tampa. I feel like that's the most logical move for him. It's worked. It's worked with him and Baker and Mike Evans. Like, it's crazy. Every year you're like, Mike Evans is not going to get 1,000 yards. It's the year he drops off. And he's like he's got like 1,000 yards. He barely
made it.
Yeah, well, this year he barely made it, right? Like this year he needed the garbage time essentially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But still, he gets it. He gets it done, and Godwin has big years. It's crazy.
Jalen McMillan stepped it up at the end of the year
Yeah,
with
he's very good.
Tampa, and I'm thinking that they might be content with having McMillan step in there as the guy to replace Godwin. Because again, Godwin's going to be 29 years old.
He's coming
Cooper
off
Kupp.
that injury.
Yeah, I mean Cooper Kupp's this is going to be 32 years old for Cooper Kupp this season, and so I think I'd be okay with it if it were a later pick, and I know that Ryan Poles is unloading all of his late picks like they're water right now, and he's just throwing anything that he can to reel in somebody, but you restructure it. A cap hit of $29 million for Cooper Kupp. I mean, that is a dangerous contract. So I think
Yeah,
that has to be contingent on him renegotiating, bringing that cap number down to like 18 to 20 at most. And figuring something out that maybe carries him through 2027 on 3 years. But again, very dangerous with what he's been in terms of a player and just injury riddled. It's tough. I mean, he missed time earlier this year as well. So again, you're going to run into a few landmines with the wide receiver market. No matter what you end up doing, it's either going after maybe one of these younger guys that's proved it in some capacity, or it's going after one of these aging veterans. Like we said, blindly pick 1 out of 5 from a pool from those names that we mentioned, and you're going to get about the same productivity.
yeah. No, I agree. Godwin would make me really happy. He would, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't see him spending the money.
Yeah. Yeah, and to this point, I haven't heard if they're cutting Kupp, but I do know that if they cut him after
post June
March
1st?
16th, so it's after March 16th. Oh, they're going to want to cut him now.
Yeah.
So between now and March 16th, it would be 22 million dead cap, and it's against 7.5 savings. If they do post June 1st release, it would be 14 dead this year, 7 dead next year, but then 15 mil in savings. And so it makes the most sense to trade because then they'll end up saving 12 million this year. So again, it's a wonky contract, and they always are when it is that much money, and if they've turned any of it into signing bonus. But the thing that makes the most sense for the Rams right now, and clearly that's the path they're going down with giving Devontae Adams so much money, is to trade Cooper Kupp before June 1st. That's got to be it. And my guess is they'll probably get a 4th or 5th. I don't think there's really much more than that. I mean, if Deebo Samuel's going for a 5th, you're not going to see much more than that out of Cooper Kupp, for as adamant as they've been about having him end his tenure with the Rams.
Yeah, we'll see on Cooper Kupp. That's an interesting, especially now they got Adams too.
Yeah, I don't understand that move at all. I really don't. I don't know. We're here to armchair, nothing more. Ryan Poles is probably in the thick of it right now, planning out his Monday and hopefully showing up at the door of one of the must-have free agents, or at least their agents' front door to say, "Hey, sign right here on the dotted line." But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. It's again a lot of possibilities for the Bears, and I think based on what we've seen so far, bringing in Jackson, bringing in Tooney, that there's a newfound realism to the front office and this new coaching staff knowing what the team needs to succeed in 2025. And it makes me feel good.
Yeah,
well, I'm sick and tired of being the offseason champs the last 4 years.
Yes, they've made the right moves so far. I'll say that. They're on the right track. Now finish strong.
Yep, got to finish strong, and it is going to be a wild next 48 hours, let alone a next week, as we see what all happens. I'm sure there's more trades to come and more signings. We'll be here to break it all down right here on the Bear Report, and I'm sure there will be, once there is some major breaking. I've got this feeling in the back of my mind we're going to have major breaking news this week, and when it hits, we'll be here to break it all down and dive through it all. And hopefully it is going to turn into wins. That's all we want, our wins. That's so much to ask.
Apparently it is.
One of these days we'll get them. Probably, maybe, who knows?
Oh, like I said, they're on the right track, but apparently this franchise, it is tough. It is tough for wins.
Yeah, definitely is. But we thank all of you for tuning in here on this Sunday evening to the Bear Report podcast, our free agency preview, whether you're watching on Twitter, Facebook, or over on YouTube. Got about 40 of you over on YouTube right now. So we do appreciate each and every one of you watching and hanging out with us. And again, keeping those fingers crossed, no matter what you're hoping for. Hopefully it comes to the Bears, and we're talking about a much more successful team in 2025. But for Zack Pearson, I'm Steven Johnson. Again, thanking you for tuning into this episode of the Bear Report podcast. We will talk to you later this week, recapping all the fun that Ryan Poles has up his sleeve for 2025 NFL free agency. Have a great rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.